Who was Jack the Ripper? Jack the Ripper, pseudonymous murderer of at least 5 women in or near the Whitechapel district of London's East End between August and November 1888. The case is one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of English crime. Some dozen murders between 1888 and 1892 have been speculatively attributed to Jack the Ripper, but only 5 of those, all committed in 1888, were linked by police to a single murderer. The so-called canonical 5 victims were Mary Ann Nichols, whose body was found on August 31st, Annie Chapman, found September 8th, Elizabeth Stride, found September 30th, Catherine Kate Eddowes, found September 30th, and Mary Jane Kelly, found November 9th. According to the common assumption of the time, all the victims were prostitutes and all but one of them, Kelly, was murdered while soliciting on the street. That belief was subsequently taken for granted in books about the crimes, which typically offered conjectures as to the true identity of Jack the Ripper, and reported graphic details of the murders he committed. Many of these books, however, were based on fraudulent claims and documents. In a radical departure from that genre, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper, 2019, the British social historian Hallie Rubenhold argued that Nichols, Chapman, and Eddowes were not prostitutes, that Stride had resorted to soliciting only occasionally during periods of desperate poverty and emotional suffering. But there is no evidence to show that she had been soliciting when she was murdered, and that the only verifiable prostitute among the 5 was Kelly. In Rubenhold's view, the notion that Jack the Ripper was a murderer of prostitutes was a consequence of the misogynistic and class-based prejudices characteristic of the Victorian era. In each instance, the victim's throat was cut, and the body was usually mutilated in a manner indicating that the murderer had at least some knowledge of human anatomy. On one occasion, half of a human kidney, which may have been extracted from a murder victim, was mailed to the police. The authorities also received a series of taunting notes from a person calling himself Jack the Ripper and purporting to be the murderer. Strenuous and sometimes curious efforts were made to identify and trap the killer, all to no avail. A great public uproar over the failure to arrest the murderer was raised against the Home Secretary and the London Police Commissioner, who resigned soon afterward. The case has retained its hold on the popular imagination, in part because known instances of serial murder were much rarer at the time than they are today. Jack the Ripper has provided themes for numerous literary and dramatic works. Perhaps the most notable was the horror novel The Lodger, 1913, by Marie Adelaide Lowndes, which inspired numerous films, including Alfred Hitchcock's The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog, 1927. The most commonly cited suspects are Montague Druitt, a barrister and teacher with an interest in surgery who was said to be insane and who disappeared after the final murders and was later found dead; Michael Ostrog, a Russian criminal and physician who had been placed in an asylum because of his homicidal tendencies; and Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jew and a resident of Whitechapel who was known to have a great animus toward women, particularly prostitutes, and who was hospitalized in an asylum several months after the last murder. Several notable Londoners of the era, such as the painter Walter Sickert and the physician Sir William Gull, also have been subjects of such speculation. The murder sites have become the locus of a macabre tourist industry in London.